Hi, welcome to my channel where we question everything. Today's topic is why I disagree with Larry Johnson and a number of other pro-Russian commentators. The general narrative on the pro-Russian commentators is that, and by Larry Johnson on the specific article, he talks about that NATO is a ghost force and NATO cannot fight any war, and NATO has never won any wars that were fought after 1945. And basically the US and NATO is useless. They are a paper tiger. And Andrei Matayanov also always talks about that the weapons are inferior to the Russian weapons, and etc., etc., etc. And I thought I'd give you a sort of a wake-up call, just to let you think a little bit about these things, and whether you want to still believe this narrative, because it's a false narrative. Now, all this information is easily available. You can Google it and so on. You can even doubt the authenticity, but if they are not true, then it's only maybe by a smaller percentage and so on. So let's start off with the wars. So how many wars did the Americans do in the last couple of years? Last 70 years. The bigger ones were the Korean War. Well, that developed to a stalemate for the South and the North Korea. So you can say basically that war is still going on. Then you can have the Vietnam War. Well, that was a mess. Yes, the Americans withdrew out of it, but they were never really in war. They were so-called assisting South Vietnamese. But in any case, let's call that a failure. And then we have Iraq, and Iraq is still going. Military-wise, they destroyed Iraq. And look at Afghanistan, and military-wise, they destroyed Afghanistan. And you can't say they were really at war at Panama, Grenada, and what's all these other Iran, Contra, what was it? Middle East, Middle America. Those small countries. Can't say they were at war in Libya because they just bombed. They have a proxy forces in Syria, so they're not really at war. So, yes, some wars they didn't win, some wars they just annihilated the enemy, but the war has successfully ended in the favor of the Americans, like Iraq and Afghanistan. But it wasn't really a military defeat, it was more a political defeat. And not even only that, they never fought military, they conquered the enemy, but other factors prevented, they couldn't occupy and control the country. And there's a definition what is winning a war and what is losing a war. So yes, they won the military conflict, but they lost the other side of the conflict. And what did the Russians do? What did the Soviet Union do? Well, they also started Afghanistan, they had to withdraw, so they lost that. Then what else did they do? Yes, there was a Chechen war, the first one they lost, but that was after the fall of the Soviet Union, where the Russian army was totally decimated and unorganized and corrupt and so on, so that's why they lost the first Chechen war. And the Second World War, a second Chechen war, they nearly lost. But then Putin came in and corrected all the problems, and the military became, well, started to resemble some form of military. But it also didn't really conquer Chechnya. There were a lot of Russian casualties and so on. But what the Second Chechen War actually created was that the Chechen rebels, or the Chechen opposition, if you want to call it, made one fatal mistake, and they occupied and took some hostages, and apparently in some hospital. And before that, they had support of the population. But when they did these terrorist acts, they lost the support of the population, and that was the end of the Chechen opposition military terrorists, whatever you want to call them. Anyway, so did the Russians really win? I don't know, not really. And then you had Ossetia, South Ossetia war in Georgia. Again, it's not that the Russian military was superior in fighting skills and stuff like that. If you really read up on what happened, is there were some unfortunate incidents, unfortunate events, and this all led to the early defeat of the Ukrainian forces and the withdrawal of the forces. It was no battle for one against one or tank against tank. Never reached that point. So the circumstances determined basically the outcome of the Georgian South Ossetia. So what else? Any other wars? The other wars were also like by proxy and stuff like that. So no, the Russians also cannot say that they won any wars decisively. And now we have the conflict in Ukraine. And as I've stated before, with this nice timed slides of the conquest of Ukraine, at the beginning of the SMO, the Russians conquered a huge part of Ukraine, and slowly they all retreated back until we have now the Donbass and half of the two provinces of Kherson and Zaporizhzhia. It's not a very good picture. So that's the wars. Nothing to carry on, nothing, move on, nothing to see. Just move on, nothing to see. So no spectacular victories in any one of those two militaries. So this narrative is false. It's one-sided bias bullshit. Anyway, so we get to the next point. And the next point is that NATO is a paper tiger. It doesn't have the weapons, doesn't have the manpower, doesn't have no results. They cannot fight a war against Russia and hope to win. Because they have sent all their weapons to Ukraine. Oh yeah, that's the tail end of the story usually. No, they didn't send their weapons to Ukraine. They sent the surplus old stuff that they were not using anymore to Ukraine. With the exception of here and there, some armament like the Germans, the Iris system, and some modern anti-battery systems, radar systems, and etc., etc. But nothing spectacular. The NASAMS, yes, they are, but it's needed. They have no other choice to do it. Anyway, so you can Google it. It's fairly easily available. So at the start of 9th February 2022, they made a comparison between NATO and Russia, and here is a typical image of that. And it says total military personnel. The first one is always NATO, and the second one is Russia. So NATO has a combined force, total military personnel of 5.4 million people, soldiers. And Russia has about 1.3 million. The active soldiers that the NATOs have is 3.3 million, and Russia has active 850,000. The reserve force, okay, we can argue a little bit about that one. 1.3 million NATO soldiers versus 250 Russians. I don't agree with that. Paramilitary units, 740,000 for NATO, 250 for Russia. I believe those are just like biased estimates. We don't really have that number. Yes, Russia claims it can mobilize 20 million people, soldiers, but I want to see that first. I don't believe that for me. They have to be excessively trained. But in any case, in the case of war, soldiers, civilians are trained 3 months, basic training, off you go. And then you learn how to really fight on the border, on the front. Anyway, so let's look at the Air Force. Total aircraft, NATO, 20,700. Russia, 4,000. Fighter interceptors, NATO, 3,500. Russia, 772. Ground attack aircraft, NATO, 1,000. Russia, 740. Transport aircraft, 1,500 versus 450. Special aircraft, 1,000 for NATO, 132 for Russia. Tanker aircraft, 680. Russia, 20. Total helicopters, 8,500 NATO, 1,500 for Russia. Does this look like a military that cannot fight Russia? That is a ghost military? Yes. Amounts, I do know, numbers don't matter in a modern war. Yes, that is the general saying. Yes, but it does matter. Isn't that what is being told for the Russians for the Ukrainians? The Ukrainians are outgunned by the amount of artillery pieces that the Russians can put into the field, and how many projectiles they can fire any minute in the day. Isn't that what is the general narrative? So surely quantity makes a sale. And if there are 3 tanks, 3 low-tech tanks versus 1 high-tech tank on that side, that surely statistically will tell you that one of these 3 will be, 2 of these 3 might be destroyed, maybe all 3 of them, but before the 3rd one is destroyed, that one is also destroyed. That is basic statistics. Any case, combat helicopters, 1,400 or 350, Russia, 550. Ground combat vehicles, main battle tanks, 14,700 NATO, 12,400 Russia. Armored vehicles, 115,000 Russia, 30,000. Self-propelled artillery, oopsie, yeah, here, 5,000 for NATO, 6,500 for Russia. Towed artillery, 5,500 for NATO, 7,500 for Russia. Self-propelled rocket launchers, 2,800 for NATO, 3,400 for Russia. Well, I'm not going to go into the ships. They're not fighting against us. So basically, nuclear weapons is the final one. NATO has 6,000 and Russia has 6,250. So as you can see, no big difference. In any case, a lot of more weapons on the other side of the fence. So should these 2 powers get into a conflict, then yes, it's going to look bad. And we're not talking about the 80,000 British troops and 90,000 French troops and 150,000 Polish troops and the 70,000 German troops and so on. No. You've got to add them all together. Because everybody will admit it. And then you can talk about the economy. How big is the Russian economy and how big is the NATO bloc economy? How many people live there? 700 and what million people versus 120 million in Russia? GDP of what? 25 trillion versus what? Russian? Mostly energy in any case. If they want, NATO can mobilize. And if NATO wants to mobilize, remember all those Second World War movies? Where the American women were working in a factory and producing aircrafts and tanks and stuff like that? Manpower. Well, in this case, woman power. But don't ever underestimate your enemy. So I don't understand. And then Larry and so on, you know, they make this statement that Russia has the best air defense system in the world. Yes, they have. Well, and the Americans have no integrated, and Larry likes to say no integrated air defense systems. They are no integrated Excuse me. They have no integrated air defense systems. They have no electronic warfare. That's NATO. Come on, people, Google a little bit. Google is free. It's easy. You can find all the information. What is an AWACS? Aren't all American fighters linked by radio signals to the AWACS that does the targeting, that does sometimes the firing, that determines who the coordinates of the targets, and what XX, isn't that all integrated? You look at some air defense systems of European countries and NATO countries. They are all interlinked, and they're not even only linked to their own system, but they are interlinked to NATO system, when you look at the NASA air defense system, they are interlinked to the Italian system and the French system and the German system, and they're all in the opera umbrella. It's all good there. It's all Google. You can see everything. Why don't you people do some homework? Yes. Okay. So we get back to the. So let's just talk about the air defense system. So the Americans have the Patriot, the big system. Then we have the intermediate system, which is NASA systems, and those are usually the rockets, which is just converted air-to-air missiles to ground-to-air missiles. But they have a range of 30, 40 kilometers. It's fine. And the Patriots cover the rest. And then we have the German Iris guns, which is the smaller guns that is for territorial defenses, shooting down UAVs. All the necessary weapons. Then you have still the Stinger ones as well, and then you have the Avenger that carries the Stinger. No problem. All interlinked. Radar systems galore. And the problem is that the NATO's have probably a lot more than what the Russians have. I mean, how many Panzer systems did the Russians build? 200, 300? You think those are enough to cover the whole battlefront? No. And you can go on and on and on. Yes, you can look at the... okay, let me go to the first ones. There's the 10 best air defense systems in the world. The first one is the Barak 8 or MR-SAM, that is done Israelis. The 9th position is by Israelis, the Iron Dome. So we're not going to talk about it, but NATO can get it. Then we have the medium extended air defense systems in 8th place, that is by Lockheed Martin and the Bundeswehr. Then we have a Chinese version, the Hong Q9 at 7th place. Then we have another one, SUMP/T, designed by Eurosam, and 6th position. In the 5th position, we have the Patriot Pack 2. 4th position, we have the A300, the Russian version. In the 3rd place, we have the American THAAD. And number 2, we have the David Sling, Rafael Advanced Defense Systems, and the Raytheon. So it's also a joint Israel, that's in 2nd place. And then we have the S-400, the Russian version. But, you know, at the end of the day, you cannot cover the whole borderline. You cannot cover all the strategic assets. And we all know that you can flood the system. And we also know that they are all radio operated. And you know you have the HARM type of missiles and the anti-radar missiles. And both sources have that. And then you have intermittent type of, like I said, the IRIS network. Not the IRIS, JPOD. So, you know, why are the Russians battling to take out the HIMARS? Because they are out of the range of the counter-battery systems. They cannot detect it. They battle to do that. And they're still being attacked. Then we talk about the long-range, say the German ones, the PH2, they can fire 60 kilometers around. Yeah, you can't detect them. And the Russians are still battling after 10 months to prevent the firing onto Donetsk city. And we had this weekend some huge 2-hour-long artillery barrage. With what? Not only with HIMARS, but normal rocket launchers, multiple launch rocket systems, which doesn't have that distance. And they did it, and Russia couldn't prevent it. And then we have the air defense systems that cannot shoot down all the HIMARS. They can shoot most of them down, but not all of them. That's called flooding the defenses. It can all be happening. And then, you know, flood the system with missiles. So the Russians use up all their anti-aircraft systems, and then you go into your bombers and your fighters and ground attack aircrafts, and there you go. Military strategies are always adjusted to the battlefield at that stage, and never ever make a mistake of underestimating a judgment. Battles are usually won by, or wars are won and lost by mistakes that men make. The wrong decision at the wrong time, that is usually what determines a battle. You can talk about technology, you can talk about the morale of the people defending their homeland or attacking another person's homeland. You can talk about training, you can talk about skill level, it doesn't really matter. Those will do the outcome of a battle, but not of a war. Mistakes determine it. In any case, so we also have this enormous pro-Russian commentators like to refer to the huge American military budget. And basically, the Russians have a much fewer, smaller one budget, and they achieve a lot better weapons value for money and so on and so forth. Yes, that's true. But there's reasons for that. The first reason is that the Russian military industrial complex is state-owned. They are not profit-driven. Yes, they are individual enterprises, and they are still supposed to be profit-driven. But being the state as the main shareholder, you don't expect 100% profit. You're happy if the books balance each other. That's not the same thing in America. So there we have a capitalistic, profit-driven industry. And as long as there is no war, and as long as there is enough money, they will ask their prices. And there's a big difference between Russia and America. And that is, America can print dollars with no consequence. Well, with very little consequences. Russia cannot print dollars unless it wants to instigate inflation. That is the benefit of having a world currency. We pay the inflation for American printing money. Anyways, also, how many bases overseas does Russia have? I don't know, maybe 1, 2, I don't know. How many does the Americans have? Between 700 and 800. And all those people have to be fed and housed and maintained, and those facilities have to be maintained and so on. You can actually go read the US defense budget. You can get that document. Google it. Easily to get. The only problem is it's a hell of a lot complicated, and you got to read pages and pages of it. And I read through some of it, but I cannot summarize. It's too much to summarize it. But then you get a good idea. But in any case, so I'll just go find another. It's not the 700, 800 billion defense budget, but it gives you some idea, you know. So the top departments of defense contract vehicles for the last 5 years. Oh, sorry, not that one. Yeah. 2023 projected defense spending markets by category management. That means what industry sectors the money is going to be spent. Drugs and pharmaceutical products, $37 billion. Aircraft, $32 billion. See, the drugs are more than the aircraft. Systems development, $26 billion. Facility-related services, $25 billion. Technically and engineering services, non-IT, $23 billion. Engines, components, and spare, SPT, I don't know what that is. I thought it would be spare parts, but in any case, $22 billion. Management advisory services, that's consultants or whatever, $22 billion. Ships and submarines, $20 billion. Construction-related services, $20 billion. Maintenance, repair, and overhaul, $18 billion. So if you look at this, okay, aircraft, maybe engine, no. Ships and submarines. So you have aircraft, $32 billion. Ships and submarines, $21 billion. That's about the acquisition of hardware. The rest are all, I don't know, general expenditure. And then you have to ask yourself, but this drugs and pharmaceutical products, $37 billion, that is part of the defense budget. Does the Russians also include that in their budget? You don't know that. So maybe you've got to compare apples with apples. Acquisitions and maintenance of your troops and so on, but That's going to be very difficult, and I have to make a 10-hour video to summarize that. But who's going to watch 10 hours of video? Boring numbers. The point here is, it is not as clear-cut as everybody wants to make. It is not as simple to compare apples with pears. You have to consider it. It is not as simple as that. One has to think about and question the narratives. And I'm sorry, I cannot agree with Larry Johnson or with Andrei Martinov or with anybody else that says that NATO is a paper tiger and doesn't know what it's doing, who cannot fight a war against Russia. That's a fallacy. We can argue about the money spent, yes, sure, we can do that. We can argue about weapon systems and so, yes, we can do that. Which one is better? Who knows? Have they ever come up face to face? No, they haven't. Looking at specs doesn't mean anything. The operator also plays a role. The circumstances play a role. The weather plays a role. The other weapons in the theater plays a role. So no, you cannot compare it. Any case, that's my story for today. If you like what you heard, subscribe to the channel. Spread the word, tell your friends. And until next time, cheers.